This is a video about a 1926 Nash Light 6 Tourer owned by Rodney and Beth Rush from Brisbane. Rodney Rush has had a fascination with old cars since he was a kid, due to his father having a Dykes encyclopedia that Rodney used to look at. As time went on and the kids came and went, Rodney realised that he had some spare spending money, so he started to look for an unusual vintage car that fitted into the pre-1930 vintage car fraternity. Rodney was not interested in Fords or Chevs of that era, so the hunt started. After several months, he noticed a 1926 Nash Tourer being advertised in a magazine. The picture was no more than a postage stamp size, so he could not really see much, but it did mention new grey leather upholstery, a good body, mechanically excellent, and stating several things that had been done to the mechanicals on the car. Rodney contacted the seller in Melbourne, and the seller gave a glowing report about the car. From this, Rodney purchased the car sight unseen. Being cautious, Rodney decided to check a few things before trying to start the engine. No water in the radiator was a concern, as the car was driven onto the truck in Melbourne. Hitting the starter button on the floor, the pinion on the starter motor fell out onto the floor. Getting the car to start was a job and a half, as the carburetor was flooding. However, they got it going and they drove the car into the building so that these other things could be checked out. A local auto electrician suggested that the starter pinion looked like one used on a farm or tractor. It was, so that was rebuilt and put back together. The water pump was found to be the fault with the engine, having no water in it, so finding a replacement was going to be a problem. Well, luck was with Rodney, as he found a Ford Cortina water pump, looked pretty near the same, and that could be fitted without much work. It did, and it worked great. Before going much further, Rodney decided to have a real good inspection of the car from front to rear. This then reminded him of the Johnny Cash song, "One Piece at a Time." The list of problems started to grow as the bad news evolved, making a decision that he would overhaul all the mechanicals himself and leave the bodywork and paint and the new upholstery to the experts. Over a period of time, Rodney overhauled most of the ancillary equipment like the bearings in the horn, the generator, the gauges and other items as required. He also fitted a new style oil filter, new radiator and fuel tank. Changing the oil in the gearbox gave Rodney a surprise, as when the drain plug was removed, a large nut fell out. It had many crunch marks on it, so a decision to pull the gearbox to bits to check the insides. Lucky, no damage was detected. Rodney took the car to a professional body restorer who did the woodwork frame and repaired any of the body panels. A new paint job made the car look great. It was then taken to an upholsterer for new upholstery, including a roof. It was all made and really smartened the car up. Getting the car running was soon done and all the normal adjustments made. The car was now due to be used, and on one of the first club rallies and heading home, the car started backfiring terribly. Inspection showed up that one of the valves had jammed in the engine. The pin holding the collet at the bottom of the spring had sheared off. All the valves were removed and a new set of Toyota valves with new tapered collets were fitted. As Rodney says, it's just a matter of finding the right people to talk to about what else can be used and fitted. The car has been going since 2000 without any problems. It is a good car to drive, but being over 6 feet tall, the front seat is a little cramped. Even having to do all the things needed, Rodney feels that he knows the car from top to bottom. He enjoys playing around with vintage cars, as his stable of cars now has grown to include a 1927 Chrysler Roadster and a 1940 Ford V8, all in top condition. A bit of history about this Nash car. This Nash was originally ordered by a Mr. Bandrup in December 1925 from a company called Rickard Brothers in Melbourne, who at the time had the Nash agencies. The car was brought as a rolling stock chassis, which includes all the running equipment. The car was sent to a company called Flood Pressings in Melbourne to have the Tourer body built and fitted. The Tourer was the most common style body in those days. Cars imported in these days had to have a percentage of local content added to them. The Nash was completed, registered and delivered back to Mr. Bandrup in January 1926. There were a few of these Model 221 series Nash cars imported into Australia. The car remained with the Bandrups until 1965, when it was sold back to the Flood Group of companies. Floods restored the car again for their private museum and exhibiting it in and around Victoria. The car was later sold in the 1980s to a car enthusiast at Nuttawading. Rodney purchased the car in 1999. The Nash Light 6 started out as an Ajax. Charles C. Nash decided that the Ajax brand was not a good seller, so he changed the name to Nash, a 221 series Light 6. This was one of the first cars with two identities. Nash sales increased by 60% for this model that year worldwide. They sold for around $865. The chassis weighed 1,789 pounds without a body. Wheelbase is 108 inches. The engine is a side valve 6-cylinder, 170 cubic inches rated at 21.6 horsepower, developing 40 horsepower. It has a 7 main bearing crankshaft with 3-inch bore and 4-inch stroke, full oil pressure fed. Gearbox standard 3-speed. Brakes were contracting rear and expanding front. Electrical system was by Autolite. 21-inch all-press steel wheels, fitted with a 4-door Tourer body. This is a great vintage car and it gets a lot of attention at shows. Only a few are known to still exist in Australia today. Thank you, Rodney and Beth Rush.